it is better to be obese than it is to yo-yo diet in terms of health
truly?
outcomes. Yes.
Yeah, and for your confidence.
Yes. You can't really multivitamin your way out of a nutrient-poor diet.
Got you.
So when we get those nutrients from food, we see benefits to health outcomes. When we get those nutrients from a tablet, we generally don't. We can very roughly say that reducing all-cause mortality by 10% very roughly translates to about an extra year of life. Fruit.
Okay.
So
Yes.
2 or 3 servings of fruit per day reduces all-cause mortality risk by about 10%.
But I'm going to push back on this because I think a lot of people through the years have heard that fructose in fruit is bad, and so fruit has been demonized.
And so the more people view foods as good or bad, the more people engage in restrictive dieting, the more likely they are to...
Number 1 on this list, seed oils.
Seed oils are actually...
That's going to ruffle feathers.
I know.
What?
Oldish. The show where age-old questions meet new age answers. With your hosts, Randy Spelling, Brian Austin Green, and Sharna Burgess.
Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, best-selling author of Nutrivore. Thank you for sitting down with us on Oldish.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you here. We've been in communication for about 2 to 3 years now.
Have you really?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is an inside job, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I
inside
see
job.
what's
Got
going
it.
on here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering.
It's a long game.
Okay,
Right,
okay,
totally.
okay.
Right. So one cup of coffee at a time.
So why I really resonated with your messages is because, first of all, you have this very interesting background for your social media videos, and you were just so effervescent with your energy and delivering food science information in a way that was so digestible and approachable.
Pardon the pun.
Right. Yes, I can't help it. I'm very punny. But what I loved is in a world of food information that makes us afraid of food and causes restrictive eating, you are here with Nutrivore to celebrate nutrient-dense foods, to talk about vitamins, minerals, health benefits of foods versus how terrible foods are. And I was like, we have to have her on.
Well, it's right up your alley.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, because your stories that you post, walking in nature, very similar to Randy's.
Very love the hikes.
A lot of walking outside, a lot of leaves and trees and
Birds, bird watching.
And nature.
What Brian, yeah.
When we
Fewer
first started,
coyotes than I run into, I hope.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
way fewer. When we first started, Brian would say on the show, and Randy, he's just so amazing. You go outside and you go on these walks and you look at birds. I was like, people are going to think that I'm a birder and not a life coach and working with people.
It's okay to be both.
Yeah, it's okay to be
There
both.
you go.
Fun to
You can be both.
They're not
That's
mutually
perfect.
exclusive. You can't either be one or the other.
I call
you can
myself
be
an
both.
extremely amateur naturalist.
I like
right.
that.
So amateur.
A
Okay.
naturalist.
Right. Somebody who appreciates nature and wants to learn about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could be that.
Whatever the level is underneath extremely amateur, that would be me.
Novice.
That would be
Double
novice.
extremely.
Yeah, there we go. I'm a
Novice.
straight beginner. There we go. But I love it. I love being outside and enjoying the
I do
outside.
DIY outside. Like it's
Right.
very.
He does
I
it.
don't know. I'm not a part of this
He
club.
sees
at all.
nails and hammers. Talk to me about Nutrivore. What is Nutrivore? I know it also is a scale that you have. There are tools in here, but as someone that hasn't read your book, please tell me, what is Nutrivore?
So I refer to Nutrivore as simply the goal of getting all of the nutrients our bodies need from the foods we eat. So that's really the entire philosophy in the nutshell.
Okay.
The challenge is that most people have no idea how to do that.
Right.
Because we don't learn about nutrients in school other than maybe like protein, carbs, and fat. We don't learn really about the interesting details in terms of how different vitamins impact different biological systems.
To be honest,
or how
I think
our bodies use minerals.
I think so many people get their information off Instagram today, and it just, as we talked before the show opened,
I think even simpler
there is a lot
than
of
that,
misinformation.
Like for me, I honestly don't even know what nutrients I need on a daily
Right.
basis to function properly. I have no idea. It's
Ooh,
like,
can we start there?
Yeah.
What nutrients do we need?
So there are 49 essential nutrients.
Oh, just a
Perfect. I'm
few
probably
then.
getting like
So-
2 of them. So that's great.
Is coffee one of them?
Sadly, no.
no. Okay.
But it doesn't mean
Creamer? No. Damn it. Okay.
but that doesn't mean that coffee doesn't have nutritional merit.
Okay.
So there actually is some biotin in coffee, vitamin B7, and coffee is one of the most concentrated sources of polyphenols. And polyphenols are really important dietary antioxidants.
Okay.
It's high on the Nutrivore score.
It is
actually,
very
in the
high.
2000s. Right?
Depending on the type of coffee, anywhere between 2,000 and 6,000.
See, I studied Dr. Sarah.
Such a nerd. My
Right.
God. Such
I'm
a
just
suck up
I'm
in
just
this.
thrilled to hear that it's
Unbelievable.
high on the scale.
So, so what I create is that education, right? So it is helping people understand at least like a general, kind of like how much algebra knowledge you have when you graduate high school,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
Or how much grammar, right? Like
Yeah.
you've learned those kind of basic things. Trying to create that level of basic knowledge about nutrients, what types of nutrients are in what types of foods, with a focus on how to add nutrient-dense foods to our diet, but maintain a like balanced, moderate, sort of healthy relationship with food.
So you
Yeah.
say there's like 41.
49.
49.
49. My God, that's a lot. What are, like, in your view, the most important that people need to absolutely make sure they're getting every day for their system to function semi-regularly?
So there are 4 essential nutrients for which 90% of Americans don't get enough of
Okay.
from their diets. And there are 10 essential nutrients for which half or more of Americans don't get enough of from their diets. So not because those are like the most important nutrients for reducing disease risk, but rather because those are the ones that we're falling short of on average the most. Vitamin D is the top, and that's a little bit of a tricky one because we also make our own vitamin D in response to the sun. So we'll just kind of put vitamin D in its own little
Randy
little
gets
box.
tons of vitamin D, I'm assuming, walking outside.
Walking-
Portland is gray
Yeah,
and
that's
rainy.
true.
The
That's
Pacific
true.
Northwest.
So which is why you're outside so much. You're compensating for the
I
fact
do
that
supplement, but we'll get into that
Yeah,
later.
for sure.
Okay,
if
so
it's
vitamin
helpful
D.
or not.
So 100%
Okay.
of people don't get enough vitamin D from their diet.
100%.
100%. Or like 99.9999%. Right?
Okay.
I'm sure there's one person
Okay.
somewhere.
And vitamin D, what is vitamin D in?
Mushrooms, but only if those mushrooms were exposed to UV light. So like brown mushrooms in the store were exposed to light, but the white mushrooms aren't. Like they're the same variety of mushroom. It's just the lighting condition makes the white ones light.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
the white ones like grow inside
So-
wood and logs and shade underneath plants.
Yeah, so when they this is you probably don't want to know how mushrooms are grown. They're typically grown in chicken manure,
Yeah.
Right.
in just like giant dark
Delicious.
buildings.
Yum.
And then they have artificial lights. So white mushrooms, brown mushrooms, portobello mushrooms, they're all the
Yes.
same species of mushroom. All Agaricus bisporus. I don't know why my brain holds on to information like that, but
Love that for you, though.
might as well
Because
pull that
it
out
needs
when I have
someone
it, right?
needs to hold on to that. information.
Somebody needs to remember mushroom
Right.
species names.
Yeah.
And so it's literally how long. So the difference between a brown mushroom and a portobello mushroom is how long they grow.
Okay.
And they grow under light, and white mushrooms are grown in complete darkness.
And so on you say they're all the same mushroom, but the brown ones are more nutrient dense. Oh no,
Yes.
they have because they have more vitamin D.
They have more vitamin
because
D.
they've been
Gotcha.
But
So
they
they're
actually
higher on
are
the
a little
scale.
bit more nutrient dense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have vitamin
Okay,
D.
vitamin D.
So vitamin D's in mushrooms and seafood, and like grass-fed beef would have a little bit of vitamin D.
Okay.
Potassium is the next most common.
Bananas, I
nutrient.
think, that's the norm.
Yeah,
right?
bananas they're fine. They're fine.
Okay.
Potatoes have more.
But people always
Oh,
say like,
interesting.
oh, you should
Potatoes
eat
have more.
you need some potassium. You should eat a banana.
Yeah.
Don't greens have high potassium too?
Relative to their calories, but not per serving.
Okay.
Interesting.
So our best sources of potassium are a lot of vegetables that are traditional in Asian cuisines, East Asian cuisines. So like bamboo, water chestnuts are high in potassium. Avocados are high in potassium. dairy products, especially low fat, because again, that's sort of the potassium is water soluble, so it's in the lower fat part of dairy. So
that's
like
interesting.
low fat yogurt, low fat milk is a pretty good source of potassium.
So if you need potassium, you can tell somebody, hey, go eat some yogurt.
yeah,
The low-fat yogurt.
Low-fat yogurt.
and slice up a banana in it, and now we've got a meal.
Or avocado.
Interesting.
Yeah, avocado.
Doesn't that sound
yogurt.
good? Avocado
Sounds
and
like baby
yogurt?
food.
No.
Sounds,
Yeah.
yeah, not for me. Thank you so much.
Kind of like the beef packets that Randy was taking on the plane.
And then the next most common nutrient shortfall is vitamin E, which is our main fat-soluble antioxidant. So it's really important, especially reduces risk of all of the things associated with aging.
Vitamin E.
Vitamin
Yeah.
E.
Okay.
And so we're also getting vitamin E from avocados. And nuts and seeds are our best sources.
Okay.
And then like a good extra virgin olive oil will have a lot more vitamin E than a refined olive oil.
Got
Okay.
you.
And then the next most common nutrient shortfall is folate, vitamin B9.
And what is that in?
It's in legumes like lentils, chickpeas, black beans, kidney beans, and it's in poultry.
Okay.
Is folate, does that have anything to do with folic acid?
Yes. So folic acid is the synthetic form that is added to fortified foods, or it's typically the form found in multivitamins, prenatal supplements. Whereas like a folate is like the broad term that refers to like a bunch of different, they're called vitamers. So they're like slightly chemically different, but versions of the same nutrient. And when it's a
Okay.
vitamin, we call it vitamers. So they're like off by a little bit, but they're all part of, like our body will take them and convert them into the active form. And some of them will take 1 step or 2 steps or 3 steps or 4 steps. So folic acid is better absorbed in our digestive tract, but takes usually more steps to convert into the active form of vitamin B9 in the body.
Is folic acid man-made compared to,
Yeah.
Yeah, synthetic.
Synthetic.
So, I mean, because that's something that we talk about. You were talking about breads and how you love bread, and that you were upset because a lot of the bread here in our country that is shelf stable
It's crazy. The ingredients list. Yeah.
has a whole lot of ingredients and stabilizers, and obviously the flour is fortified.
Yep.
Where are we on the scale of fortified foods being health, a benefit or not so good?
I think there's an interesting nuanced conversation to have about them, because you can't sort of talk about fortification without talking about multivitamins. So because it's the same forms, right? It's the same forms of the nutrients that are in a multivitamin versus in a fortified grain product. So multivitamins generally don't have much health signal when you look at these big studies that look at all-cause mortality, which is a general indicator of health and longevity used in these big studies to determine whether or not something is good or bad for us overall. So people who take a daily multivitamin don't have any difference in all-cause mortality, don't have a difference in cancer incidence or cancer mortality, and don't have a difference in cardiovascular disease or cardiovascular mortality.
Really? So the benefits of a multivitamin are not necessarily proven.
Correct. Now, that doesn't mean there's not like specific situations where they might be beneficial. So
Yeah.
there's like research showing that B complex vitamins can slow age-related cognitive decline in the elderly. As we've talked about vitamin D. If you're low in vitamin D, a supplement's kind of your only
Option.
useful
right.
option for getting it back up into a good range. So that doesn't mean that like all supplements or all even nutritional supplements are bad. It just means that as like nutritional insurance, you can't really like multivitamin your way out of a nutrient poor diet.
Got you.
So when we get those nutrients from food, we see benefits to health outcomes. When we get those nutrients from a tablet, we generally don't. And there's not a really good explanation for why in the science. So there's like some good ideas. So part of it is we probably don't absorb everything that's in one of those tablets.
Yeah.
Those tablets tend not to break down quite fast enough in our digestive tract. So probably a lot of those nutrients are just going straight through us.
Right.
It might not be enough, right? It just might not make up enough of the difference between how much nutrients the average person is getting and what we actually need. And also, there's a lot of really important nutrients that aren't formulated into multivitamins, right? Multivitamins typically don't contain fiber, for example.
Right.
Or polyphenols, as our wonderful antioxidants we're getting from coffee. So we just might be still missing enough things that it's still just like not enough to make a difference, or maybe a little bit of all of the above. So when it comes to fortified foods, there's a few success stories. So they have reduced iron deficiency anemia, they've reduced neural tube defects, and they've reduced goiter. So we have some great success stories from those nutrients. But are they reducing the big, rates of, cardiovascular disease or cancer? Are they lowering all-cause mortality? We don't see that either, but it's also really muddy data, so it'd be hard to say for sure.
Okay. This word all-cause mortality, I know you use this a lot, and this is something that gets me really excited because eating certain vegetables, fruits, I want to hear what other actions we can take that will lower all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality. So tell us about this.
So as I mentioned, all-cause mortality is kind of this like general way of measuring if something is good or bad for us overall. It captures mortality from disease. It captures mortality from old age. It also captures mortality from accidents. And of course, accidents would increase the likelihood of a fatal car accident, for example, if you were not feeling great, if you weren't thinking very clearly. So it kind of captures all of those different things.
Yeah.
And because of that, it's just a great way in science to go, how good is this overall?
I've honestly never even heard that term.
I've never
before.
heard the term.
I say it every single day.
I don't live at your house, so that's probably
now
probably the
I've heard,
problem.
right, okay.
Yeah.
But we can very roughly say that reducing all-cause mortality by 10% very roughly translates to about an extra year of life. And an extra year of
Really?
lifespan and health span, right? So if we're reducing all-cause mortality risk by something that reduces risk by 10%, we can kind of roughly translate that to
That's
living a year
amazing.
longer.
So
I'll
how
take
do
that.
we
I'll take
reduce
that.
Yeah.
from the
How do we do?
science?
What are the first steps
From
of
the
that?
science, how do we reduce all-cause mortality? What can help?
So in terms of nutrition, the top 5 foods to add that have the biggest impact on all-cause mortality, one is vegetables. The science is mixed, but 3 to 5 servings per day. Some says up to 6 is a great
3 to 5 servings.
5 or 6 servings, and a serving would be
about the volume of your
about a
fist.
cup.
Yeah.
About the volume cooked.
I don't need
No,
3. I don't need
measured
3 to
raw.
5
Measured
meals.
raw.
How do I? How?
So wait.
Yeah.
So you can take spinach or greens or even a big chunk of broccoli and cook it down, and
It'll be about half a cup. So that's about half of a fist.
not
so
that
it's not
much.
much. It's really easy to eat 3 servings of vegetables at one meal, especially if they're cooked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it doesn't.
So I can
think-
eat them all.
Yes. Yeah. You absolutely can.
So I just got to be.
He generally eats
snacking
once
on
a day,
celery.
so
Yeah,
he
I
was
do.
like, how am I going to ever do this?
Right, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
5 servings. that's
Probably
crazy.
already are. You it's because especially when your vegetables are cooked, one serving is this much. So if half of a plate is covered in vegetables,
Well,
you're probably
last night,
getting
for
3 to
example,
5.
we did Brussels sprouts, carrots, bell peppers, and potatoes, roasted.
Sounds delicious.
Doesn't
So
it?
you totally, it was very
It was
good.
delicious.
We're trying to do more vegetables
Yeah.
at the house.
She did a
Anyway,
coconut
please.
amino thing. On it.
So
Chicken.
3 to 5 servings of vegetables
it.
per day reduces all-cause mortality risk by about 25%. So that's an extra
Really?
2.5 years.
25%?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
That's an extra 2.5 years of healthy life.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I need
Wow.
that. We need that. You need that.
What else?
What?
Fruit.
I'm like,
What are you
have
trying to say?
You have to live to 100.
The grilled cheese isn't going to give me an extra 2.5 years of life.
It's the youngin being like, we need that, okay?
Yeah, I'm
You need
like,
to stay
buddy, you got
healthy.
12 years on me. We're going to need all the extra
Right.
years we can
Okay.
get. You're living to 100. Okay,
Fine.
let's continue. What else can we do?
Fruit.
Okay.
So
Yes.
2 or 3 servings of fruit per day reduces all-cause mortality risk by about 10%. So that's
Dude, Randy-
another year.
Randy's
now-
living to 150.
I don't
That's-
eat that
that's
much fruit.
Randy's
They think
favorite.
I eat all of this fruit because I will have a banana or something that is quick.
I
don't
would say
eat
the
It's
most
really
amazing,
Brian that
the
makes
most
fun of it.
exciting experience for him is walking in a room and seeing a fruit bowl because,
Yeah.
his mind starts.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm going to push back on this because I think a lot of people through the years have heard that fructose in fruit is bad, and so fruit has been demonized.
My son, my 2-year-old, for example, loves fruit. And then there's also people that say things like, that's too much fruit, it's too much sugar. People that come from many decades ago belief systems. And so then I worry, but he's just a fruit eater.
Yeah, kids are fruit eaters because they actually need more carbohydrates than we do as adults, and they're wired to taste sweet. Humans are wired to taste sweet, right? Like we recognize sweet flavor as something that's very beneficial for survival. So it's totally normal for kids to eat a lot of fruit, and it's completely healthy for them. You want to also be working on expanding the palate and adding in some vegetables, but we don't develop a liking for the more bitter flavor of vegetables until quite a bit older, and that's perfectly developmentally normal. So I think fruit's gotten a really bad rap for being nature's candy and being a fructose bomb and all of these things that are not actually supported by the scientific literature. So there doesn't seem to be much benefit to eating fruit above 3 servings per day. It seems to kind of flatten out. We get a lot of benefit going from 0 to 1 servings, 1 to 2 servings, 2 to 3s, maybe a little bit less. And then we kind of we don't get much benefit above that. But we don't have harm either.
Right.
And I think one of the challenges with diet misinformation online is everything's often presented as black or white, right? This thing is good, this thing is bad. And very few things in biology were really complex. Almost every biological system has this happy medium range for every nutrient, this happy medium range for every exposure to something, potentially toxic, right? There's a certain amount that we can handle and we can detoxify. For every nutrient, we don't want to be low, but we don't want to be high either. Fruit has a lot of things that are hard to get from other foods, really beneficial fiber types for our gut microbiomes, vitamin C, polyphenols, antioxidants. There's some really cool niche polyphenols in fruits that are benefiting our health. And because they're whole fruit, it's blunting the blood sugar response. And probably the reason why we don't see much benefit above 3 servings a day is that we start to get into higher levels of fructose.
Okay.
Right? So, but fructose in that up to about 45 grams per day is beneficial. It can actually help get more glucose into your muscles to have some fructose in your system.
So what's interesting for me is I've never you really made some sort of a connection with the dietary needs of children being as active as they are and all of that is much different from adults.
Yeah.
And so in fruit.
Which makes sense. I just didn't realize they would need more. I didn't think they need more carbohydrates than we need.
Right. 'Cause they're active
That's a really beautiful piece of
And
information.
the interesting thing is that it's not black or white.
Right.
So even when people were saying, no fruit for a long time.
No eggs, no, everything
there
changes
could
constantly.
be something if you're sitting and gorging on 5 melons and, 5 mangoes and at once.
Yeah.
At some point, that might not be good because of the glucose spike after a certain level.
doing it once, it's not going to do anything. It's if you're doing that every single day.
You eat that much
Right.
fruit anyway.
Can you?
Five melons?
Is it easy to consume too much of one thing vitamin wise? I know some people when they're working out, they'll do a dozen eggs in the morning and things like that. Is there a point where you can start doing harm to your body?
Is there a macro? Because that would be more macro, right? Is there a macronutrient that you can eat too much of?
You can eat too much of all the macronutrients, right? So
Fat, protein,
carbohydrates. And we can separate out fiber, right? So
Fiber.
going from 0 to 100 in terms of fiber usually doesn't go very well.
Right, no.
That's we want to inch up slowly with the fiber.
1 bean at a time.
Right, totally.
Maybe not quite that slowly, but I think going up by 5 grams per day, but every few days, give all of the bacteria in our digestive tract some time to renormalize and rebalance and adjust. And that's one of the things that actually is a challenge in helping people adopt a healthier diet is sometimes going from what we're eating now to what would be really healthy won't make people feel good.
Is a shock to your
because
system.
of that big increase in fiber.
I did that, Dr. Sarah. I did. I have tried many different ways of eating, partially because I like to experiment and see how I feel. I'm a big believer in tuning in and knowing, hey, what works and what doesn't, regardless of what a test shows that I'm sensitive to this or not sensitive. I'm I know when I eat that, I just don't feel good. So I don't do it. But someone challenged me because they said, you have never not eaten animal protein. That's been a constant in my diet since I was a kid. And I was so resistant, but I did it. And I went vegan for 2 months. And it did not go well for me at all. My system, because I wasn't really doing legumes or grains.
Right.
And so I didn't go too hard on those things, but it was a mess. I mean, it took me about a year to recover from
Did
that.
it really?
Wow.
Yeah, but that's just me. That doesn't mean that isn't, helpful for
Right.
other people.
Right.
It's just my microbiome, the way that it was, it was too much too quickly, and I had more headaches. I had I had low energy. It just didn't. I had dark circles.
There was a study done a couple of years ago where they took one group of people and gave them like 45 grams of fiber per day. It was a lot of fiber. And then the other group had 6 servings, I think, if I remember correctly, of fermented foods. So yogurt, kombucha, kefir, sauerkraut, foods like that. And what was really interesting about the study is the people who had the fermented food diet had improvements in their gut microbiome composition that was pretty predictable and universal. The people who had the high fiber diet were kind of all over the place. So some people had improvements and some people had loss of microbiome structure. And it seemed to be really dependent on what the starting microbiome was, right? If you don't start with a really healthy gut microbiome and you throw a lot of fiber on there, you're going to be feeding
It's like throwing a big log on a small fire.
Right.
Yeah.
And if that fire is in your house, right, that's not something that you necessarily want to do, right?
Yeah.
So, so the results were just way more unpredictable, and you had some people have increases in inflammatory markers, and some have decreases in inflammatory markers in the high fiber group. But in the fermented foods group, they all had lower inflammation. So
Adding fermented foods.
definitely, especially if you're upping your fiber intake, adding fermented foods can definitely help create a new equilibrium with the community of microbes that call our guts home.
Yeah. Okay, that's good
Interesting. So how does a person know then where they're starting? Because also, as we're talking, what makes sense to me is that everyone needs something different. It depends on their starting point. And I think it also just depends on you as a human and your body, right? On what you need nutrient-wise, or do we all just need the same things?
So there's probably some differences, but the differences are all in that between minimum and maximum, right? So they're kind of already in this there's already this happy medium range, and somebody might need lower the range, someone might need higher of the range. But the problem is right now in Western countries in general is that most people aren't even making the minimum part of the range.
Gotcha.
So yes, you might need more, but let's just get you up to the daily value as a starting point, and then we can play from there. And we're just at a situation where, because diets for 70 years have been defined based on what you cut out, what you restrict, what you avoid,
Right.
what you eliminate. Right now, if you listen to every single person out there who told you what not to eat, and you just I'm going to combine all of these, you wouldn't even be able to drink water. There would
Right.
be nothing left
Yeah.
to eat. And so that's been the noise, right? That's what I grew up with was, first low fat, and then it was low carb, and then it, it progressed to all of these other ways of being terrified of foods. And I bought into it. I tried so many. I was morbidly obese, so I tried so many different
You were
diets.
morbidly obese?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So I was, really vulnerable to the promises of, do this, and you'll lose weight and, look like, what society is telling me I'm supposed to look like, right? Who's on the magazine cover this month. And I think that's everybody's story, right? That's how we're all being inundated with these messages from the diet and weight loss industry of you're not good enough and it's your fault, you're weak, right? You don't have willpower, you don't have discipline, and all you need to do is cut out this bad food for this long. And what that means is we have, first of all, a really faulty idea of the nutritional merits of foods, because we just see every single food as, potentially toxic and inflammatory and all of these other buzzwords that are used by wellness influencers. But nowhere in any of that diet education is there a focus on what to add, what is actually, where am I actually going to get my nutrients?
Right.
What is the value of vegetable versus like nuts and seeds versus legumes versus seafood versus, poultry or red meat, right? Like what are these different foods going to give me nutritionally?
Right.
And when we fall for what the diet and weight loss industry is telling us, we're setting ourselves up to fail because of the psychology of dieting. So when we view foods as like good or bad, right? We have this yes food list and this no food list. We have what's called dichotomous thinking with diet, and we restrict the bad foods, right? I'm not going to eat my grains or gluten or dairy products or whatever it is. I'm not going to eat these things. We've got a whole variety of psychology studies showing that increases food fixation, food cravings, that drives emotional eating. It dramatically increases the risk of developing eating disorders by 30 to 35%. It drives the yo-yo because what happens is you're now craving this food, this bad food that you're not supposed to have. You eventually give in or you reward yourself. You're traveling, you have no other choice, right? Something happens to cause what's called disinhibition. It's that moment where you break your rules and you now eat that food, and then it makes all the health behaviors unravel. And so the more people view foods as good or bad, the more people engage in restrictive dieting, the more likely they are to regain lost weight and continue that yo-yo.
Of course.
We also know the more times you yo-yo, the worse that is for your health. It is better to be obese than it is to yo-yo diet in terms of health
truly?
outcomes. Yes.
Yeah, and for your confidence.
Yes.
I mean, I see this with so many people is when they say that they're going to do something and there's something that they want to adhere to, a way of eating or exercising, and then they're good for a little bit and they're feeling good. And you could tell just that check mark of I'm doing something for myself. And then they fall off or they can't do it. The shame cycle, the breaking that promise to themselves. And if that happens over and over again, then this belief forms, I just can't do it, or it's too hard, or I'm not good.
I'm not good at this,
way.
I can't do it,
Yeah, and I think that's also crushing for people.
And I think that the entire diet and weight loss industry actually leverages that psychology to propel itself.
Of course.
Right? It is
the
actually
dark side of it.
reliant on us failing. It's reliant on us failing and blaming ourselves for not being disciplined enough or strong enough or having enough willpower. And so what I'm trying to do,
because then they have new things to sell.
Right.
Yeah.
Sell
New
you, right?
programs
This
to
is the
join.
thing that you're not going to fail
next
with.
supplements
diet, the
to
next
help you.
supplement, the next biohack.
Which might
Such a
not be
doc.
so great for your personal finances that you're not out selling supplements and
Right.
different things, but kudos to you for doing the work that you're doing and creating something like Nutrivore, because I've shared it with clients. I've shared it in a couple groups that I run, and we had a month where we were celebrating nutrients in foods, and I gave these little challenges of going and going to the market with their families and just looking up, hey, what are the nutrients in this? What are the benefits to it? So that messaging and that coding where they look at a food and they're appreciating its orange color and the vitamins that it has. Now the whole family is looped in to that thing being something that is dynamic and energetic and life-giving. And it's kind of exciting.
Just your explanation of mushrooms and like why they are the colors that they are. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh man, I want to go to the market
Right?
now and like start
at
studying mushrooms. I don't know why, but it's
So for those that are listening, I know it's not a diet. Nutrivore is not a diet. You call it even like the anti-diet.
It's somewhere in between diet and anti-diet.
Yeah.
Because Nutrivore is about improving diet quality, but without like restricting food. So without engaging in that sort of restrictive diet mindset, but still caring about choosing foods that have nutrients, right? So it kind of lives in between the diet and anti-diet worlds in a way that frankly is quite awkward. So you can apply Nutrivore as a diet modifier. If you like being a pescatarian or you like the paleo diet, you can take the Nutrivore sort of nutritional sciences education and
Make sure
some
you're
small
getting the
changes.
nutrients within the diet. that you're
Exactly.
How do you feel about the like the blood type diets? People always say like
Eat
depending
right
on
for
your
your
blood
blood
type,
type. Yeah.
you should be eating this way. Your body doesn't need this, or your butt like how.
So my understanding, I haven't dug into the science myself on this really deeply, but my understanding is it doesn't have science to dig into, so that
Okay.
it's not doesn't actually have
Any
scientific
merit.
validity.
How
Perfect.
interesting.
Well, because
Yeah.
I think, and you're the scientist
Okay.
here, so, but if it were that simple, then we could all just take our blood and put it in. They can just give certain foods and they could see instantaneously what is working and what's not, right?
But isn't that the challenge with all the way all diets are marketed at us? They're all marketed at us as it's simple. All
Right.
you need to do is cut out this
Like
thing,
there's
right?
no
Like,
Right,
there's
it
no
is.
custom
It's-
tailoring
You're a
at all
carnivore, but you're a
within
vegetarian.
diets. Like it's all very.
Yes.
It's you're in this group, you're in this group, and it's like it's
yeah.
fine,
So
like custom tailoring.
it is.
Yeah.
It's so I have a list here for you. I kind of
Okay.
wanted to put you on the hot seat. There's some things that we discuss and we were talking about. But before that, can we go back to all-cause mortality?
Yes.
Because that's exciting. I mean, for all the listeners, it's like, how do
we only talked about 2 out of the 5 foods
Right,
to add.
right.
Yes.
Gotta bring it, we
foods,
gotta
and then you
Bring
were
it
like
back. Thank you, Randy.
nutritionally. So I was thinking, oh, there's something else.
There's some other things.
Yeah. So
Okay, so the other 3 foods to add, one is legumes, which we have already talked about.
okay. One bean at a time. I
one-
can do
one-
that.
I
at a
love
time.
legumes, so that's fantastic news.
Let's actually take a moment to say not all foods work for all people, and this is what the science says is beneficial on average, right? We're not all average.
Thank you for
And
saying
so-
that.
I say
Yeah,
we take a moment to
absolutely.
celebrate legumes, though. I mean,
Okay, Bri.
let's
Yeah,
give
yeah.
them a big round of applause.
So that means try it out and see how it feels on your body,
Yeah.
right? But these are
Right.
the 5. Okay.
And I think, this is why we ideally would all love to have a registered dietitian at our disposal, right? Who can say, hey, look, yeah, this food's not working for you. Here's where else you can get those same nutrients, right? So if we're talking about legumes, other places we can get those same nutrients are nuts and seeds. They're often actually combined with legumes in scientific studies. They'll do like legumes, nuts, seeds, and peanuts all in one
Oh, interesting.
one group
Oh.
and
Okay.
like measure all of those benefits together. Nuts and seeds would be another one of the foods to add, but also like root vegetables will have a lot of the same nutrients. Whole grains, especially the pseudograins like quinoa or buckwheat, will have a lot of the same nutrients. Amaranth. So it's not. There's a lot of health benefit to legumes because they're so nutrient dense. They are the most nutrient dense starchy food on average. Tons of fiber, really healthy protein. But there's nothing in them that we can't get from somewhere else. So if it doesn't work for you, it's okay.
Okay. Okay. So
Legumes.
Legumes. And the last one is seafood.
seafood.
Yeah. So and obviously there's people who are going to be allergic, right? There's going to be people who, choose not to eat seafood for ethical reasons or religious reasons, right? So again, we want to just sort of understand what are the nutrients in seafood that now, if we can't eat seafood, now maybe we're identifying a supplementation strategy. Where are we going to get those long-chain omega-3 fats? The only other place that we're going to be able to get them is something like algal oil.
Algal
What-
oil?
Algal oil.
That's how you say
Algal.
it?
Yeah, that's how you.
I thought it
There's
was
always such a big-
algal. What
There's
is
always
it
such a
for
big
people
push
who don't know?
for CoQ10. That's not and
CoQ10 is a fascinating vitamin-like compound.
Okay.
We can make some.
Okay.
So that's kind of why it's not labeled as an essential
okay.
nutrient.
Yeah.
But our like most rich, like CoQ10 rich foods are organ meat and seafood.
Which organ meat I'm fine on.
I love
avoiding.
liver. I would eat liver. I love it.
Ugh.
I feel a challenge coming on.
Randy and his challenges.
No.
Randy, we've got
No.
enough challenges
Liver.
right now,
No,
okay?
Liver. Liver?
Liver is so good.
Ugh.
Do you not eat it?
I do.
I grew up with it. My
I
dad
like
used
I
to
grew
make
up with
it.
it too.
I grew up every Sunday and I would find ways to hide it in my napkin, throw it out.
Oh, yeah.
So you're like me. You still don't
I
eat.
have developed more of a taste for it as an adult, but as a kid, it was like.
Are you
liver
like
and
drunk or
onions.
something when you enjoy it, or is there like does it usually go like a cocktail glass of wine and liver,
No,
or like
but
how?
That's disgusting.
I tend to focus on recipes where there's like a lot of other flavors.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
So you hide it.
Like a
You
steak
mask
and
it.
kidney pie, right? Like there's so much going on in there. You're not gonna
A what?
Steak and kidney pie.
Okay.
A little
Yeah.
kidney.
He's struggling with this right now. I see it on his face.
This is
He's like,
really
"No,
difficult for me.
Steak and kidney
And my
pie is
chai
amazing.
latte
You're
is
kidding. You
empty.
wouldn't even know it.
You wouldn't
You'd
even
just
know
eat
there's
it.
kidney
You wouldn't
in it.
even know.
It's
But
delicious.
if it raised your health by
Whatever.
24%, no.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
It
I have
matters.
some great news for you, Brian.
Okay. Please.
And that is
please
that
share it.
mollusk, shellfish, like
Yes.
oysters, clams, and mussels,
Yes.
that we look like we maybe enjoy better, have almost identical nutrient profiles. to
Fantastic.
organ
He doesn't
meat.
eat those.
You don't
I
eat any
do.
seafood?
Oysters?
I know, but I eat clams.
Oh, you do
mussels?
eat clam chowder.
Yes, and I'll eat mussels.
Okay.
I just don't eat oysters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
clams and mussels.
So almost identical nutrient profiles.
Which
to
is
liver.
amazing.
There you
Yeah.
go.
So there I go.
And
There you
by
go.
the way, for a lot of people to know, because sometimes it seems like with diets, it's only for the wealthy.
Right.
Like
Yeah, totally.
all organic,
Or
great.
even
I
eating
subscribe
healthy.
to that, but it's really expensive.
Extremely.
All grass fed, again,
Super
great.
expensive.
I love it. Very expensive. Mollusks and canned or tinned mollusks, very inexpensive and a great way, I think, to get
oh yeah.
what you need. Right?
The nutrient retention in canned foods is impressive. This was not something.
Really? Wait a
Right?
second. Go, that's a statement I would not have thought.
Did not know this until I started crunching numbers. So I developed a nutrient profiling method called the Nutrivore score
Yeah.
as a tool to help people identify nutrient-dense foods. Not the only number we want to be considering when we're choosing foods. We never want to simplify food choice to something that simplistic, but a really interesting lens through which to view food. And my favorite way to use it is redemption arcs, right? It is iceberg lettuce is more nutrient dense than artichoke or cucumber or celery.
Iceberg
Wait,
lettuce?
what?
Iceberg lettuce.
So I've always heard that
That it-
iceberg lettuce literally has nothing
nutrients.
Right.
for
It's
you.
like water. There's
Right.
nothing.
crunchy
Yeah.
water,
Yeah.
right? No, it's not as nutrient dense as other lettuce types. If
Right.
you like other lettuce,
Okay.
you will get more nutrients per calorie and per bite from other lettuce.
But
it
iceberg is
but
not
iceberg is still
pointless for
yeah,
you to eat.
Still a
More
very
than
nutritional-
artichoke?
I mean, the difference is not actually meaningful,
Right, okay.
but mathematically, yes.
That's very interesting.
So have at that wedge.
Right.
Next time.
The wedge
Yeah.
salad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring it
yeah. How's
back.
blue cheese in your system?
He loves loves a wedge salad. This guy.
Cheese is the most concentrated food source of calcium.
I'm winning.
Right.
I'm winning.
But yeah, in crunching these numbers, one of the
I don't have
surprises
to
to me was that canned
organs?
food is equally as nutrient dense to the fresh version.
That's
of it.
And then
really
how about
amazing to
freeze?
hear.
I've heard that freeze drying too is a really amazing way, especially with fruits and vegetables, of storing the nutrients.
Regular drying, we do lose some vitamin C, so we tend to see a little bit of a drop off of
Yeah.
nutrient density for regular drying, but we get more retention with freeze drying and just freezing, right? So just buying frozen fruits and vegetables.
I
they're
heard is
basically the
actually
same.
better for you than buying a lot of fresh stuff sometimes, right? Because it actually
Sometimes I don't think the difference in the end means
it's that big of
anything.
a difference.
Yeah, I don't think, if we're talking about a 10% difference
Right.
in nutrients per calorie.
What it does mean though is if somebody's argument is it's expensive to
Right.
eat well, then it's
Right.
like, okay, this is going to last you 20 times longer than the fresh version, which you get a couple days out of.
And it's quick.
and
I
it's
mean,
quick.
something that is nice about it is it's approachable. You take a big bag of frozen veggies if you want to get it in,
Yep.
or frozen
It's already
fruits.
chopped for you. It's already washed.
Yeah.
It
5
has
minutes.
instructions right on the bag of how to cook it, so you're not going to mess it up. And it's not going to go bad in the back of your fridge while you're.
It's
Right.
really beautiful to hear that. There's probably a little bit left, but I often see sometimes mums of multiple kids online, and they're sharing their quick recipes, and it'll be frozen things or canned things, and the hate that they get online. But what are you doing? It's not organic. It's not fresh. You're poisoning your kids. And these poor women are just trying to survive with feeding 4 or 5 mouths, and on whatever income that they have, and doing the very best job they can, only to get online shame from other mums saying it's not organic, you're poisoning your kids. So to hear what you're saying, I think is so important and helpful for them to know that they're actually doing a really
Yeah.
great job.
For sure.
So one of the things that I want to do with Nutrivore is shift the entire conversation in the wellness industry from restriction to permission, right? Focusing on foods that we can add, and then adopting a more balanced approach. So making room for what I call quality of life foods, right? So like the foods that maybe don't have a lot of nutrition, but are absolutely delicious and provide me with joy. Making room for those foods intentionally as a tool to make those overall healthy eating patterns sustainable.
Yeah.
But also, those quality of life foods can be the foods that are fast, that I just had to, throw in the microwave for 2 minutes, and now I've got a meal for my kids on the table. Or they're budget stretching foods, or they're cultural foods, traditional foods. It also allows room for us to adapt our food choice to our means, to our preferences, and to any other dietary priorities that
Jesus,
we
can
might
we
have.
work on removing
Yeah.
the shame from food
Yes,
and dieting
exactly.
also? Because that is, it's every time a new diet is, it's everybody comes down so hard on people that don't follow the thing that they follow to live.
Yeah, the newest piece of
it's
like
all
seed
about
oils
And we've
or-
talked about it before. It's all about like we talked about it when Dave Asprey was here, and he was talking about obesity and all of that, and Ozempic, and he was saying, listen, being healthy is the number one thing you should be focusing on. Whatever makes you healthy.
Right. Right. Yeah.
The shame of it is unbelievable.
Yeah, I think sometimes too the overwhelm, because online you get keto, whole food plant-based, vegan, and if you're
Paleo.
eating animals, you're gonna die. But then it's also like, but there's then carnivore where you only eat
you only eat meat.
and I can watch that. I can literally see 5 different viewpoints and go, oh, so there. I just have no idea what to do now.
Right.
There's some like credence to all of them. So now which one do I pick?
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you say to all of those? I know we can't speak to each and every one, but all of the sort of one particular way of eating type diets.
So I want to create resources for people who enjoy those diets, who believe that those diets are working for them, to get more nutrients out of their diet. Like, I don't think it's what you avoid that makes your diet healthy, right? It's the foods that actually make it in, whether or not they're supplying your nutrients, that make your diet healthy. So even though vegan or carnivore would eliminate all food sources of some nutrients, I feel like the Nutrivore sort of nutritional sciences education can help someone identify what those nutrients are, right? The nutrients that are harder to get, they can find the food sources that align with their preferences to get those nutrients. The ones that are sort of impossible to get, okay, now we've identified the need for a supplementation strategy. And what I would like is for those people to work with a registered dietitian or a licensed nutritionist to be able to do some nutrition tracking, see where they're falling short, and figure out those small tweaks. I don't, as much as I think the fear mongering around food, the moralization of food, labeling foods as good or bad, and then labeling ourselves as good or bad when we eat those foods, as much as I think that is like that is toxic diet culture, right? That is everything that's wrong with diet culture. I also don't want to take away somebody's diet that they really like.
Totally.
And so that's, again, sort of why I say Nutrivore kind of lives in this world in between diet and anti-diet. I think the default mode is kind of anti-diet, right? I create a lot of resources to help people like alleviate their fears around foods and not be afraid of seed oils or food dyes or whatever, and feel comfortable reducing their food budget and doing so in a way that's still improving their diet quality. But I also want to create resources for the person who is not ready to let go of their fear, who stands by their diet as being the thing that works best for them, and still have resources for that person to be able to make some small changes to still improve their diet quality. So for me, Nutrivore is also kind of diet agnostic, right? So if you have a diet you love, I still have resources for you. If you are ready to ditch diet mentality completely, I have resources for you.
I just want to highlight a sentence that you said because I think it's so perfect and like of a nugget. It's not what you cut out that makes you healthy. It's what makes it in that makes you healthy. And so often, as you've said already in just this conversation, what we think we're being healthy by cutting things out, cutting out dairy, I'm cutting out gluten. Oh, I'm healthy now. But what else are you getting all the nutrients you need? What else are you actually putting in your body? And it makes so much more sense to just flip that perspective on, instead of focusing on what you're cutting out, focus on what you're putting in. Right?
Yes. Across the board.
Across the board.
Like in terms of happiness, here are the reasons why I'm so unhappy and I have to cut all these things out and cut these people out. You can, and it works, but that can also be very difficult. But when you add in something, right? When you bring more joy, more happiness, more connection, by nature, the scale is going to start tipping. So when you add more foods, if you're adding more vegetables and fruits, by nature, you're probably going to eat less of the foods that might not be working for you so well.
Yeah, very, very cool.
Okay, we have a list.
We have a
Ready
list.
for this?
We have a
The
list of things.
myth-busting list.
Yes,
All right.
let's do some myth busting.
Yeah.
I love myth busting.
Number 1 on this list, seed oils.
Seed oils are actually good for us. So they reduce.
Ooh, that's gonna ruffle feathers.
know.
What?
So I actually just wrote a 12,000 word article. That's up
So just
on
a
my
small one.
website.
Got
Just
it,
a small, just
Like a
little,
tweet.
Just a
tiny
casual little
Right.
paragraph.
Little-
yeah.
little-
Just tweets require
It was
12,000
only
words,
like
don't they?
5 months of work, so like
Wow.
a real fast one.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
That is busting all of the myths about seed oils, because otherwise we'd be here for the next 3 hours
Right.
talking about
Right.
all of them. But the summary is they reduce all-cause mortality, cardiovascular disease incidence and mortality. They don't affect cancer incidence, but they do still lower cancer mortality, and they reduce risk of type 2 diabetes.
Okay, question. Is there a difference in how they're processed? Is it better to get the seed oil from eating the actual like sesame seeds instead of the seed oil that sometimes you add to Asian dressings? Like,
It's always better to eat the whole food.
Right.
But also, we're allowed to eat food that tastes good. And I would actually argue that making our food taste good is a really important part of sustainable nutrition. So maintaining that higher diet quality
So
for
would
the
I.
rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Right? So the reality is we need some kind of oil to cook our food.
Mm-hmm.
And olive oil and canola oil are tied for the 2 healthiest
canola oils?
Yeah,
Stop
I
it right
know.
now.
Which is
Right?
also known as rapeseed oil,
Yes.
right?
Rebranded by Canada. Go Canada.
Yes. So
Wait, I saw, no, because I'm going to explain this wrong, but it was something that I saw on Instagram, like the New York Times Instagram.
right.
Right.
And it was
Instagram
like,
News was telling me.
the way that it's processed made it highly toxic because the reason I know this partially is because our kids love oat milk, and there's this whole thing about how oat milk's so bad of you because
Because
of
in
the
Oatly,
canola.
and there's rapeseed oil.
Rapeseed
and they say
oil
there's
in it.
So
Yeah.
many.
So I've tried to cut it out of our home because of thinking it's terrible for them.
So
Which
let's-
they've now changed. They've reformulated Oatly, I think I'm
They have
guessing
one
for
that's
that
just-
reason.
They have
Yeah,
a
for
4
the marketing.
ingredient.
They have-
a 4
yeah, they have
ingredient
one
where
is-
they
yeah.
don't have that. They have like
Right.
citrus fiber in
Yeah.
it.
Tell
But
me. Tell me the
supposedly
things.
there's like solvents and hexane and different things,
Okay,
right?
let's-
This is what
let's-
makes it around.
Let's do it. Let's
Yes.
go into
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'll send all of the listeners over to Nutrivore.com. Click on
Yes.
the myth busting
Yes.
icon, and the vegetable oils article is right there. So if any of this is like, oh man, I need to learn more, please go there.
Yeah.
So hexane is used to help like separate the oil from the fibrous material in the seed. Hexane is really easy to evaporate. So then the oil is very gently heated, far below what you need to worry about oxidation or damaging the oil, and that evaporates the hexane. Studies that have looked at whether or not there's any hexane in the finished oil show most oils have none detected, and there's little trace amounts in some oils. If you do the math and you calculate how much oil would I have to consume every single day in order to hit what's called the chronic reference dose for hexane. So that is the amount that we want to stay below. So all of these different like chemical additives, solvents, pollutants, right? Like heavy metals, we have either what's called an acceptable daily intake level or a chronic reference dose. So those are limits set by regulatory agencies that is we want to stay below to stay safe, but those levels already have a safety factor built in compared to what toxicology studies show would be like a level that could start to increase health risks. Okay. So in order to stay below the chronic reference dose for hexane, you would only have to consume 11 liters of the highest hexane detectable vegetable oil every single day.
Got it.
It's 97,000 calories of vegetable oil every day.
I'm just
11
under that,
liters.
so thank goodness.
Yeah. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm safe.
Wow.
So that's how much is left. Collagen peptides, by the way, use hexane as well.
And yet there's a huge push
there's
for
a whole
those.
halo around collagen peptides.
Wow.
They also use
that was a
hexane
mic
in their
drop right
extraction.
There you go. That was
Yeah,
my
yeah.
job.
That just
Which is
exploded
easy because
people's
my
heads.
drops anyway. I can't touch it right now.
Fascinated.
Right.
Fascinated canola oil.
So it's so canola oil is up to 66% oleic acid, which is the exact same fat in olive oil. Olive oil ranges 60 to 80% oleic acid.
Okay.
Only 20% is omega-6 linoleic acid, which is the one that's sort of like demonized in vegetable oils, but is actually good for us. And then 7 to 15% alpha-linolenic acid, which is an omega-3, which is also why canola oil can sometimes smell fishy when it's heated up.
Oh, interesting.
And it's also one of the highest phytosterol oils. And phytosterols are plant compounds that have a really similar structure to cholesterol. And it actually like interferes with cholesterol absorption in the gut and can help lower our serum cholesterol.
Okay, so why?
Okay.
I know we could talk for a long time about this, but two things on this. One is why has this? All I hear is inflammation, inflammatory. Where did that come from? Is there any scientific study that shows increase in inflammation whatsoever?
So I used to believe this myth too. And it's one of the reasons why I've done such a thorough job in busting it, because I feel like it's very important to correct the record on things that I got wrong in the past, this is one of them. And it's also the reason why this myth has been around for so long and it's so pervasive and it's so deep is there is this like scientific seed of truth to it, which makes it very easy for like scientists and doctors to look at that scientific seed of truth and buy into it. And then it kind of takes on a life of its own where the language gets more hyperbolic and inflammatory. See what I did there? Over time, right? So the concern is this biological pathway where the linoleic acid in vegetable oils can get converted into another omega-6 in our body called arachidonic acid, which lives in our cell membranes and can be basically taken by the cell and turned into what are called signaling molecules. So these are like chemical messengers in our body that help they're kind of like short distance hormones, right? So hormones are like our long distance signals, and then these molecules, thromboxanes, prostaglandins, eicosanoids, are like the short distance signaling molecules, and they're used by the immune system to help regulate the immune system. So the concern is, well, if linoleic acid can get turned into arachidonic acid, and then arachidonic acid can get turned into these signaling molecules that increase inflammation, then surely, right, if A turns to B, turns to C, then A must equal C. But human studies where they feed people linoleic acid or vegetable oils show that overall they have a neutral or slightly anti-inflammatory effect. And this is because we are not one chemical pathway. We are incredibly biologically complex, and just like linoleic acid can get turned into arachidonic acid, it can also get turned into dihomogammalinolenic acid, or DGLA, which is a very anti-inflammatory fat in our bodies. And a bunch of other nutrients will help steer that conversion from one pathway to another, one of which is omega-3s, which is why something like canola oil, which has the omega-3s built right in, is a very healthy oil to juice.
So interesting.
Okay, so I can hear people saying, who's that? Who the studies? Who are they funded by? Are they funded by, big ag, big oil? Are that right?
Canola oil. Right.
I mean, but that is
it's true.
That is
Who
the
is it
idea. Is
funded
like,
by?
who is it funded by?
Yeah.
Is
So studies always have a conflict of interest statement. So if like one of the authors also does consulting work for a company, that'll always be listed. That doesn't mean like the study's flawed, but that's always part of the transparency for scientific studies. And then they always list their funding sources. So if they got funding from some big General Mills, Tyson Food, I'm like reaching for the biggest food companies I can think of. Or if they got funded by, most of these studies are funded by government granting agencies, right? So like the National Institutes of Health, whose job it is to fund academic research that is expanding human knowledge. Their job is to give professors who spend their careers doing scientific research the funds for that research. And when you have grant funds, that means you don't have to go to industry for the money. So the vast majority of these studies are funded by granting agencies. So that is a granting agency. So when I did medical research and had these types of grants, they give you the money, you give them a report at the end, you're like, look, I did the thing that I promised I would do, and that's it. They're not in there going, we need this result. They are just there to make sure that science happens, because all of our coolest technological advances come from scientific discovery. So science for the sake of science is really important. But beyond that, we're not just looking at individual studies, we're looking at systematic reviews and meta-analyses. So these are studies that look at the whole body of scientific literature. So they look at every study that's been done that's trying to answer the same question, and they pool together all of the data from all of those different studies and go, okay, what is everything showing me? Where is the preponderance of evidence? And one of the things that's really important to know about meta-analyses is they include a step that evaluates a study for bias. So they evaluate a study for bias. They evaluate a study for like, how well controlled is this? Did they have the right controls? Did they do these measurements that are like, oh, looking at that and that looks blue to me, right? Or that looks green to me. Or did they take a measurement where they took a blood sample and stuck it in the machine spat out a number, right? So like, how rigorous are the measurements? How well controlled is the study? How big is the data set? Are there any problems, right? Is this a representative sample of the population? Yes or no? So they actually look at the quality of the study, and they will throw out studies out of their analysis that don't meet a rigorous scientific standard. And then they pool together all of the data so they have really high statistical power to be able to say, look, this is what all of the science says all together. Overall, the effect is this. Overall, the effect is vegetable oils are beneficial.
Wow. I'm going to throw out one more, and then we're going to have to go to the after show.
Food dyes. Can we do food dyes?
Food dye. Yeah, I was going to do alcohol. We'll save. Which one should we save? Because I still have more.
Let's save alcohol.
Okay, we'll save alcohol
dyes.
for after the show.
Let's do food dyes.
Food dyes. Now, before we even say this, I just have to be honest. Even if you say food dyes are not harmful at all, I just don't want to eat them. That's just opinion.
Yeah.
Unless she's like, hey, there's actually some like nutritional value
Lowers all
to
cause
food dyes.
mortality by 13%.
Right.
Okay. Food
That's not the
dyes.
case with food dyes. So in order to talk about food dyes, we need to talk a little bit more about the dose makes the poison as a concept in toxicology. So when it comes to additives, preservatives, and contaminants, it's really important to understand how much can my body just detoxify, right? I've got livers and kidneys, and I've got detoxifying organs. They can handle, a certain amount of toxic load, right?
Yeah.
So we want to understand, like, how much is a problem, right? At what level do I need to start worrying about cancer risk, right? Genotoxicity or, birth defects or any of these other concerns. And so studies look at what's called a dose response. So they'll look at, like, how does the more my dose increases, how does my risk of health problems increase? Mm-hmm. And from that dose response, regulatory agencies set some limits. So either the acceptable daily intake level, which is what is set for food dyes because they're a food additive, or chronic reference dose if it's a contaminant. So they set an acceptable daily intake level for food dyes based on way high, like if you feed rats in a lab a whole pile of Red 40, eventually they do develop cancer, right? So we have these acceptable daily intake levels. They're typically 100 to 1,000 times lower than the level that's deemed safe, right? So we build in a little bit of a safety factor.
Okay.
So from like a cancer risk perspective, nobody is consuming enough food dyes to worry. There are, right, so it's obviously some socioeconomic disparities. There are some groups that are exceeding the acceptable daily intake level of some food dyes, but it's still like way below.
I have to assume Fruit Loops, like if you eat those every single morning for breakfast, it's enough food dye in there to do some damage.
So I don't remember the entire list of like the foods that were like the most likely to be contributing food dyes, but I do remember that ice cream cones were on that list.
Were they really?
Ice cream cones.
Yeah. So it was cones.
Interesting.
I assume that meant that ice cream was in the cone, but actually I'm not entirely sure now that you say that.
Interesting.
Wow. Okay.
But yeah, so there are some people who are exceeding the acceptable daily intake level of food dyes. But fortunately, because of that safety factor, they're still way below the level that is likely to increase health problems. And that is, people with food insecurity are more likely to be exceeding the acceptable daily intake level for food dyes. The acceptable daily intake level does not take into account effects like hyperactivity in children.
Right, behavioral changes.
Right? So it is looking at things like cancer, cardiovascular, like it's looking at the
Health.
big things, right? Like,
Not mental health, physical.
is this genotoxic?
Yeah.
So what's interesting about hyperactivity in children is despite 50 years of research looking at food dyes and behavioral challenges in children, they have not been able to find a causation, right? They have not been able to find definitively, yes, food dyes cause these behavioral issues.
No correlation between any.
Well, there are now a collection of studies where they've, the parent doesn't know if the kid is actually getting the food dyes or not. The kid doesn't know, the doctor doesn't know, right? They've really controlled it. And then they've said, hey, does your kid seem more hyperactive than normal? There are a couple of studies where when they start to parse out the data, it looks like maybe some kids are sensitive to food dyes. And I can tell you, one of them is mine.
Yeah.
Right. So I have one kid who doesn't she's fine. She could eat all the candy and be fine. I have another kid who we call it hulking out, but it's really like a sad
right.
Hulk.
Yeah.
So it's really like sadness instead of anger. And even as a 17-year-old now, she will not touch food dyes. She doesn't like how she feels.
Yeah.
So I think I'd love more science to be able to say definitively this percentage of kids has sensitivity to food dyes. We don't have enough data to be able to say that yet.
So
but it does look
interesting.
like there are some. And so this comes down to like figuring out what works for you.
Right.
And
That's that
experimenting.
individuality
Yeah.
thing we were talking about just
Yeah.
dietarily.
Yeah, and also the liver pathways. What you were saying, this pathway, this is where I think it becomes really individual, because depending on your detox pathway and how you can detox and how healthy and efficient your liver is, some people might not have the same pathways on average that other people do. So maybe food dyes, average don't make that much of a difference. But for some people, they might be more sensitive to it because they might not be able to detox it.
Right.
Is that the idea?
Yeah. So I think, also there's potentially like receptors in the brain that things are, binding with. And I think it's one of the challenges with food dye research is because causality has not been established and probably complicated by some people having a sensitivity and a lot of other people not, right? So that probably makes it harder to actually identify like what are the receptors that are being activated here, or is there like a change in neurotransmitters, like what exactly is happening, and then how is that metabolized in the brain versus the rest of the body. Like trying to understand all of those biochemical pathways means first we need a population to study, right? And we don't have that yet because we haven't figured out what group of people is more sensitive.
Right. Wow, it's fascinating.
It's a lot of information.
Dr. Sarah, thank you again for the work that you're doing. Just having this conversation and talking about food, I feel less fearful.
It's
of
so enlightening.
foods,
Yeah,
right?
I feel much more like I'm excited to go on with my day now and have a better sense of what I need and how to do it. And I'm not, like you said, I'm not nearly as afraid as I was before.
Yeah, and what
I thought
can
for
we,
sure, like I'm,
right? You're
I'm
like, oh
tanking
no,
my system. Yeah.
Like, what can we add in, and also just for having an open mind for being what I feel should be scientific.
Yeah.
Where we keep an open mind to things and not just hear what someone says so much in an echo chamber that we get fixated on what is right and wrong without being movable or open to considering other aspects of it.
It's tough. It's tough out there. It's tough to have an open mind when so much of the information that we're fed about foods and nutrition is fear-based. And especially once that fear is triggered, it's really hard to let go. And so my big picture recommendation is to curate our social media feeds and figure out whose content is triggering that fear response that I can maybe
Get rid of.
hit that unfollow button maybe, or hide that. You got lots of options for hiding content from yourself.
Yeah.
And find some other people to follow that make you feel hopeful and make you see the positive side. And then, be open to being wrong.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough to be wrong. It doesn't feel good. But it's also really important to continue to grow as people.
I love it.
I love that.
Thank you. And for everyone, Nutrivore is the book. We'll put the links and to your website and the book and everything. So definitely go get it. I highly recommend it. And stay tuned for the after show. You can go to Patreon to access the after show. And we're going to get into the rest of the list here. Alcohol and corn syrup and meat and preservatives.
All the good stuff.
All sorts of things.
All the good stuff.
if you're watching this, which you're watching this on YouTube, hit like and subscribe, please.
Or also, if you're listening to this on anywhere you listen to podcasts,
Just tell
please
people.
just hit follow. It's one signal, one button, and helps us more than you know, and we'd appreciate it. Hey, if you're going through something right now, if you need additional support, then please reach out to me at randyspelling.com/help or go to my Instagram at randyspelling. Thanks.